Are you courting me?
I'm afraid I am.
Do I?
Yes, you do.
So I go and stand in the corner?
She married a charming stranger. Then she started wondering if he wanted her dead. Suspicion wasn't just Alfred Hitchcock's first American film to win an Oscar. It was a masterpiece built on compromise, studio interference, and an ending that haunted Hitchcock for the rest of his life. The leading man almost walked away. The studio forced a rewrite that changed everything. And one prop, a glass of milk, became the most terrifying object in cinema history. These are 20 weird facts about Suspicion. And the bonus? Cary Grant had a clause in his contract that nearly destroyed the entire film. Pour yourself a drink, but maybe check it first. This story gets dark fast.
And if you were to die first,
If I were to die first.
Number 1. Before Joan Fontaine ever stepped onto the set, the role of Lena McLeodlaw belonged to someone else entirely. Loretta Young was Hitchcock's first choice, a glamorous star with the perfect mix of elegance and vulnerability that the director craved. She read the script, loved the psychological tension, and verbally agreed to take the part. But then she made a fatal mistake. She showed the script to her agent, who immediately saw problems. The character was too passive, too naive, too willing to be victimized by a handsome sociopath. Her agent argued it would damage Young's carefully crafted image as a strong, independent woman on screen. Within days, Young pulled out, citing scheduling conflicts that everyone knew were fabricated. Hitchcock was furious. He'd already started pre-production, designing shots around Young's specific screen presence. But instead of compromising, he pivoted immediately to Joan Fontaine, who just worked with him on Rebecca. Fontaine brought something Young never could have, a genuine fragility that made audiences believe she could love a man even while suspecting he might kill her. What seemed like a casting disaster became one of Hitchcock's greatest strokes of luck, because Fontaine didn't just play the role, she embodied the terror of loving someone you can't quite trust. Number 2. Cary Grant signed on to Suspicion with one non-negotiable demand buried deep in his contract. His character could not be a murderer, not on screen, not implied, not even suggested in the final frame. Grant was at the peak of his career, the embodiment of sophisticated charm, and he refused to let audiences see him as a cold-blooded killer. It wasn't about ego, it was about brand protection. His entire persona was built on being the man every woman wanted and every man wanted to be. Playing a wife murderer would shatter that image permanently. Hitchcock initially agreed, thinking he could work around it with clever ambiguity. But as filming progressed, the restriction became a creative straitjacket. The source novel, Before the Fact, by Francis Iles, made it crystal clear that Johnny Eisgarth was guilty, a charming psychopath who slowly poisoned his wife. Hitchcock shot test footage showing Grant's character as the villain, hoping to change the actor's mind. Grant watched the dailies and walked into Hitchcock's office with a simple message: change the ending or I walk. With Grant threatening to leave and RKO Studio backing the star, Hitchcock had no choice. He rewrote the conclusion, turning a psychological thriller about a woman married to her murderer into a story about paranoia and misunderstanding. Hitchcock called it his greatest artistic compromise, and he never forgave the studio or Grant for forcing his hand.
her name, do you know her?
Yes, but lay off, John. You've enough on your hands for one day.
Number 3. The glass of milk scene didn't start as the most iconic image in the film. It began as a technical problem that needed solving. In the script, Johnny brings Lena a glass of milk late at night while she's sick in bed. The scene played simply enough during rehearsal. But when Hitchcock watched the footage, he realized you couldn't see the glass clearly in the darkness. It disappeared into the shadows, making the entire moment lose its visual punch. Most directors would have just added more lighting or reshot in daylight. Hitchcock did something else entirely. He ordered the prop department to put a light bulb inside the glass of milk itself, not near it, not behind it, literally inside the liquid. The crew thought he'd lost his mind, but when the camera rolled, the glowing glass became the most sinister object anyone had ever seen on film. It floated through the darkness like a poison beacon, drawing every eye in the theater. Audiences didn't know why that glass felt so threatening. They just knew it did. The milk became more than a drink. It became doubt, fear, and the slow creep of dread, all contained in one illuminated prop. Hitchcock later said that single shot justified the entire production, because he'd taken something ordinary and made it unforgettable. And he did it by refusing to accept that darkness was a limitation.
Wondering how it would happen, of waking in the middle of the night, shaking with terror, and finding myself praying that whatever it was.
Number 4. Joan Fontaine won the Academy Award for Best Actress for Suspicion, but the victory came wrapped in pain and isolation. Behind the scenes, Fontaine and her sister Olivia de Havilland, also a major Hollywood star, were locked in a bitter rivalry that made the set unbearable. The two hadn't spoken in months after a series of personal and professional betrayals that tabloids covered relentlessly. When Fontaine learned she'd been nominated alongside her sister for competing films, the tension escalated to open hostility. They avoided each other at events, refused to acknowledge each other in public, and their families chose sides like warring kingdoms. On Oscar night, both women sat in the audience, dressed impeccably, smiling for cameras, dying inside. When Fontaine's name was called, she walked to the stage in shock. Her sister didn't applaud, didn't stand, just sat frozen while photographers captured every second of her humiliation. Backstage, reporters swarmed Fontaine, asking about the sibling rivalry. She deflected with grace, but her eyes told a different story. She'd won the biggest award in film, but it cost her the last threads of family connection. Hitchcock watched from the wings, fascinated by the real-life drama that rivaled anything he'd put on screen. Later, he admitted he'd used the sisters' tension to fuel Fontaine's performance, pushing her to channel genuine isolation into Lena's paranoid spiral. Sometimes the best acting comes from the worst pain. Number 5. Alfred Hitchcock fought RKO Pictures for months over the film's ending, and he lost spectacularly. In his original vision, adapted faithfully from the novel, Lena discovers Johnny is indeed planning to murder her for insurance money. In the final scene, she writes a letter to her mother, explaining everything, then drinks the poisoned milk anyway, choosing love over survival in a devastating act of psychological submission. Johnny mails the letter after her death, sealing his own fate out of guilt or stupidity. It was dark, twisted, and absolutely brilliant. But when Hitchcock screened this ending for RKO executives, they revolted. Test audiences hated it even more. They couldn't accept Cary Grant as a murderer. They wanted the charming rogue redeemed, the wife's fears proven wrong, a happy ending that betrayed every psychological truth the film had built. The studio ordered reshoots. Hitchcock refused. Meetings turned into shouting matches. Finally, RKO threatened to shut down production entirely and sue for breach of contract. Hitchcock caved, but he made sure everyone knew he'd been forced to compromise his artistic vision. The new ending suggested Johnny was merely reckless and financially irresponsible, not homicidal. Lena's fears were all in her head, a nervous breakdown dressed up as intuition. Audiences loved it. Critics called it satisfying. And Hitchcock spent the rest of his life calling it a betrayal. He later said he should have walked away from the project entirely rather than let the studio gut his ending. But he needed the film to succeed, needed Hollywood to accept him as a major director. So he swallowed his pride and let them ruin what could have been his darkest masterpiece. Number 6. Cary Grant didn't want the role of Johnny Aysgarth. When his agent first sent him the script, Grant read 20 pages and threw it across his dressing room. He saw immediately what the part required, playing a charismatic sociopath who manipulates his wife toward death. It went against everything his career stood for, but Hitchcock wouldn't take no for an answer. He called Grant personally, pitching him on the challenge of playing darkness hidden beneath charm. He told Grant this role would prove he was a real actor, not just a movie star coasting on good looks. Grant listened, then said no again. Hitchcock tried a different angle. He offered Grant script approval rights, an enormous concession. He promised the ending would protect Grant's image. He even suggested they could explore the ambiguity together, find a middle ground between villain and victim of circumstance. Grant hesitated. What finally changed his mind wasn't the artistic challenge or the script control. It was money. RKO offered him a percentage of the box office profits on top of his salary, a deal structure that was rare in 1941. Grant's business manager ran the numbers and told him to take it. So Grant accepted, but he came to set every day with visible resentment. He fought over line readings, questioned character motivations, and pushed back on any scene that made Johnny too obviously guilty. Hitchcock accommodated him because he had no choice. But in private, the director seethed. Years later, Grant admitted the role taught him more about acting than any other film. But at the time, he felt trapped playing a character he despised. Number 7. The famous staircase scene where Lena believes Johnny is about to push her to her death wasn't originally in the script. It came from a nightmare Joan Fontaine had during production. She had been so immersed in the character's paranoia that she started having stress dreams about her own husband trying to kill her. In one particularly vivid nightmare, she was trapped on a staircase with him approaching from behind, and she couldn't tell if he meant to embrace her or throw her over the railing. She woke up in her hotel room, shaking, and wrote down the entire sequence. The next morning, she nervously mentioned it to Hitchcock during a break. She expected him to dismiss it as actress anxiety. Instead, his eyes lit up like a child's on Christmas morning. He immediately called the screenwriter over and started blocking out the scene. Within hours, they'd rewritten an entire sequence around Fontaine's nightmare. The cinematographer designed lighting that made the staircase look like it descended into hell. They shot it in one long day, with Grant and Fontaine barely speaking between takes. The tension was real because Fontaine was exhausted, and Grant was annoyed at the last-minute addition to his schedule. When you watch that scene now, you're seeing genuine fear on Fontaine's face. Not because of Grant, but because she was reliving her own subconscious terror. Hitchcock loved actors who brought their psychological baggage to set. He believed real fear made better performances than any acting technique. And Fontaine's nightmare proved him right.
I'm going through with this deal. I don't want any interference from you or anyone else. Is that clear?
Yes, that's clear.
Number 8. Behind the scenes, Alfred Hitchcock was conducting a cruel psychological experiment on his leading lady, and she had no idea until years later. Hitchcock had developed a directing method he called ice and fire, where he would alternate between warm encouragement and cold dismissal to keep actors emotionally unstable. With Fontaine, he took it further. He'd tell her before scenes that her sister Olivia would have played the moment better. He'd show her dailies and point out her physical flaws, suggesting the camera made her look weak or unattractive. During lunch breaks, he'd praise other actresses working on the lot, comparing their beauty and talent to Fontaine's. It was systematic emotional abuse disguised as direction, but it worked exactly how Hitchcock intended. Fontaine became increasingly fragile, uncertain, desperate for approval from anyone on set. She'd ask Grant between scenes if her performance was acceptable, and he'd barely respond. She'd seek reassurance from the cinematographer, who'd been instructed by Hitchcock to stay neutral. By the middle of production, Fontaine was a wreck, exactly like her character. Her vulnerability on screen wasn't acting, it was survival. When she finally learned about Hitchcock's manipulation tactics decades later during an interview, she said she felt violated, but also understood. He'd given her an Oscar, but he'd broken something inside her to get the performance. Hitchcock never apologized. He considered it part of his craft. The director who made audiences feel fear had no problem creating it behind the camera, too. Number 9. The film's opening sequence almost cost them Cary Grant permanently. In the scene, Lena meets Johnny on a train, and he sneaks into her first-class compartment without a ticket, charming his way past her objections. It was meant to establish his playful, roguish nature, but Grant saw it differently. He thought it made his character look like a creep, a boundary-crossing manipulator from the very first moment. Grant demanded rewrites. He wanted Johnny to have a legitimate reason for being in first class, some misunderstanding about tickets rather than deliberate freeloading. Hitchcock refused. He needed audiences to see Johnny's charm and moral flexibility immediately. The argument escalated until Grant threatened to walk off the production entirely, forfeiting his salary and contract. RKO. Executives panicked. Without Grant, the film collapsed. They scheduled an emergency meeting with Hitchcock, Grant, and 3 studio heads. For 2 hours, they negotiated like diplomats at a peace summit. Finally, they reached a compromise. Grant would play the scene as written, but Hitchcock would add a line later, suggesting Johnny had money problems, framing the ticket evasion as financial necessity rather than the character flaw. Grant agreed reluctantly. Hitchcock added the line, but shot it so quickly and quietly that audiences barely noticed it. When Grant saw the final cut, he realized he'd been manipulated. The scene still played exactly how Hitchcock intended, and the added line did nothing to soften Johnny's character. But by then, it was too late. The film was finished, and Grant learned a valuable lesson about negotiating with Alfred Hitchcock. You might win the battle, but you'll never win the war.
You don't smoke, do you?
No, I don't.
Number 10. Franz Waxman's haunting musical score wasn't his first attempt. Hitchcock rejected the original composition entirely, calling it too romantic and not nearly paranoid enough. Waxman had scored dozens of Hollywood films, but this was his first collaboration with Hitchcock, and he badly misjudged what the director wanted. The first version emphasized sweeping strings and romantic themes, playing up the love story between Lena and Johnny. It was beautiful, technically perfect, and completely wrong. When Hitchcock heard it during the initial screening, he stopped the film 20 minutes in and asked to speak with Waxman privately. In his office, Hitchcock explained that romance wasn't the point. Suspicion was. Every note should make audiences question Johnny's intentions, should mirror Lena's growing paranoia, should creep under their skin like poison. Waxman went back to the drawing board and started over from scratch. This time, he built the score around dissonant undertones, musical phrases that started pleasantly but twisted into something darker. He used unusual instrumentation, letting certain notes hang too long, creating tension in the silence between phrases. When Hitchcock heard the revised version, he smiled for the first time in weeks. This was exactly right. The new score didn't tell audiences how to feel. It made them uncomfortable without knowing why. Waxman later said that working with Hitchcock taught him that film music shouldn't just accompany the story. Sometimes it should work against it, creating a psychological discord that mirrors the character's internal conflict. That lesson changed how he approached every score afterward. Number 11. The famous scene where Lena researches poisons in the library wasn't filmed in a real library at all. RKO built an elaborate set that cost more than some entire B-movies of the era, complete with thousands of actual books purchased from estate sales. But there was a problem nobody anticipated. The books were old, dusty, and many were mildewed from decades of storage. Within hours of setting up the library set, Joan Fontaine started sneezing uncontrollably. Her eyes watered, her nose ran, and she could barely deliver her lines. The production shut down while they tried antihistamines, but nothing worked. Fontaine was severely allergic to the antique books. Hitchcock faced a choice: rebuild the entire library with new books or find another solution. Instead, he did something brilliant. He had the crew remove all books within 10 feet of where Fontaine would be standing and replace them with painted wooden props that looked like books from a distance. The real books stayed on the outer shelves for authenticity. When you watch that scene, Fontaine is literally surrounded by fakes while appearing to be drowning in knowledge. Hitchcock loved the irony. A woman searching for truth, surrounded by illusions. Number 12. Nigel Bruce, who played Lena's lovable but bumbling friend Beaky, died in the film in a scene that traumatized him to shoot. Bruce was a character actor known for playing Dr. Watson in the Sherlock Holmes series. Always cheerful, always bumbling, always surviving. But in Suspicion, his character drinks poison brandy and dies horribly, possibly murdered by his best friend Johnny. The scene required Bruce to convulse, gasp, and collapse in agony. He'd never played a death scene before and didn't know how. The night before filming, he got drunk in his hotel room trying to calm his nerves. He showed up to set hungover and terrified. Hitchcock, sensing genuine fear, didn't comfort him. He made it worse. Between takes, the director described in gruesome detail what poison does to the human body, how the muscles seize, how breathing becomes impossible, how consciousness fades. Bruce turned pale. When cameras rolled, his performance was so convincing that crew members looked away. The terror on his face wasn't acting. It was a gentle comedian forced to confront his own mortality on camera. After filming wrapped, Bruce told friends he had nightmares about the scene for months. Number 13. The film's most controversial moment almost got cut entirely by censors. When Johnny kisses Lena aggressively against her will in an early scene, the Hays Code Office flagged it as promoting sexual assault. They demanded it be removed or reshot to show Lena enjoying the kiss. Hitchcock refused both options. He argued the scene was essential to show Johnny's disregard for boundaries and Lena's confused attraction to danger. The censors pushed back harder. Letters flew between RKO and the Hays office for weeks. Finally, Hitchcock proposed a compromise that was actually more disturbing than the original. He'd keep the forced kiss, but add a shot of Lena's face afterward, showing conflicted emotions, not quite resistance, but not quite consent. the censors somehow approved this murkier version. What they didn't realize was Hitchcock had made the scene more psychologically complex and troubling. Now, it wasn't just about a pushy man. It was about a woman's complicated response to violation. The confusion between fear and attraction that made Lena's character so tragically realistic. The censors thought they'd won. Hitchcock knew better, but... Number 14. Joan Fontaine kept a secret diary during filming that she never intended anyone to read. She wrote in it every night, documenting Hitchcock's psychological manipulations, Grant's coldness between scenes, and her own spiraling mental state. The diary entries became increasingly desperate and paranoid, mirroring her character's journey. She wrote about feeling watched constantly, about suspecting the crew whispered about her when she left the room, about believing Hitchcock was trying to drive her insane for the camera. Years later, when researchers discovered the diary in her estate papers, they realized something disturbing. Fontaine had started losing the ability to distinguish between herself and Lena. Her personal entries mixed with character notes until they became indistinguishable. She'd write about fearing her real husband, then cross it out and write about fearing Johnny, then cross that out too. By the end of production, she was signing some entries Lena instead of Joan. Hitchcock had succeeded in blurring the line between actress and role so completely that Fontaine's grip on reality had loosened. When she finished the film, she burned several pages of the diary, ashamed of what they revealed about her mental state. Number 15. The coastal cliff scenes were shot at a real location in California that had a deadly history. The crew set up along a stretch of coastline where 3 people had died in separate accidents over the previous decade, falling from the crumbling edges during storms or moments of carelessness. Local residents warned the production about the danger, but Hitchcock insisted on filming there because the location looked authentically menacing. During one take, as Grant and Fontaine acted out their scene near the cliff edge, a section of ground gave way beneath the camera operator. He dropped his equipment and grabbed onto a support pole, hanging over the edge while crew members rushed to pull him to safety. Filming stopped for an hour while everyone recovered from the shock, but Hitchcock wasn't done. He had them set up the camera in the exact same spot and continue shooting. Grant was furious, calling it reckless endangerment. Fontaine was too shaken to protest. They finished the scene in tense silence, with every crew member hyper-aware that one wrong step could be fatal. When you watch that cliffside confrontation, the fear in both actors' eyes isn't just performance. They were genuinely terrified of the location. Number 16. Alfred Hitchcock had a peculiar obsession with Joan Fontaine's hand throughout filming. He'd stop scenes to criticize how she held objects, positioned her fingers, or gestured during dialogue. It seemed like directorial perfectionism until the crew realized something darker. Hitchcock was fetishizing her hands specifically. He'd have the cinematographer shoot extreme close-ups of her hands holding teacups, turning doorknobs, clutching the bed sheets in fear. He kept these close-ups even when they disrupted the film's pacing. Fontaine noticed but said nothing, afraid of angering the director. But when she later discussed it in interviews, she revealed that Hitchcock once told her he thought hands revealed more truth than faces because people couldn't control them the same way. He believed genuine emotion leaked through fingers and palms. Whether this was artistic philosophy or personal fixation remained unclear. What's certain is that Suspicion contains more lingering hand shots than almost any other Hitchcock film. Watch Fontaine's hands throughout the movie, and you'll see they tell a parallel story: tension, fear, and desperate grasping for security that never comes. Number 17. The breakfast scene where Lena reads about a murder in the newspaper almost didn't make the final cut. Studio executives thought it was too slow, too subtle, just a woman reading at a table. They wanted action, wanted dialogue, wanted something happening. Hitchcock fought to keep it because he understood what they didn't. The scene wasn't about what Lena was reading. It was about Johnny watching her read it. The way he observed her reaction, calculating whether she suspected him, adjusting his own performance based on her fears. It was a masterclass in psychological chess played across a breakfast table. During filming, Hitchcock made Grant and Fontaine run the scene 15 times without explaining why. He wanted them exhausted, wanted the performance to feel routine and domestic, wanted to strip away any theatrical energy. By the 15th take, both actors were barely acting anymore. they were just two people at a table, one reading, one watching. That's the take Hitchcock used. When executives saw the final cut in context, they finally understood. The breakfast scene had become one of the film's most suspenseful moments, without a single word of dialogue about the actual murder. Pure visual storytelling. Number 18. Cary Grant insisted on doing his own driving in the car scenes, a decision that nearly killed both him and Joan Fontaine. Grant had raced cars as a hobby and considered himself an expert driver. He convinced Hitchcock to let him drive the actual vehicle during filming rather than using rear screen projection. The first few takes went smoothly, then Grant decided to improvise, taking a corner faster than planned to make the scene more exciting. The car skidded, tires screaming, and Fontaine screamed for real as they careened toward a ditch. Grant managed to regain control at the last second, stopping inches from a tree. Fontaine emerged from the car shaking and refused to get back in with Grant driving. The production had to hire a professional stunt driver and shoot the remaining car scenes with doubles. Grant apologized, but seemed more embarrassed than remorseful. Hitchcock used the incident in his favor, filming Fontaine's genuine terror immediately after the near crash for reaction shots. Her pale face and shaking hands weren't makeup or acting. She'd just survived what she thought might be her final moments, and Hitchcock captured it all on film. Number 19. The film's original runtime was nearly 2 hours and 40 minutes. Hitchcock's first cut included extensive backstory for both characters, scenes showing Lena's sheltered childhood, and Johnny's history of gambling and debt. Studio executives watched the rough cut and demanded massive cuts. They said modern audiences wouldn't sit through that much psychological buildup. They wanted the runtime under 2 hours. Hitchcock resisted, arguing every scene was essential to understanding the character's psychology. But RKO threatened to bring in another editor to do the job if Hitchcock refused. So he made the cuts himself, but strategically. He removed the backstory scenes, but kept all the ambiguity and suspense. What emerged was a tighter film that actually worked better because it withheld information. Audiences didn't need to see Johnny's past to suspect his present. The missing context made him more mysterious and threatening. Hitchcock later admitted the studio was accidentally right. Sometimes less backstory creates more tension. The deleted scenes were thought lost for decades until a partial work print was discovered in a vault in the 1980s, showing what might have been a very different, slower, more explanatory film. Number 20. Suspicion became the first and only Hitchcock film to win an acting Oscar, but Joan Fontaine almost didn't attend the ceremony. She'd convinced herself she wouldn't win and didn't want to sit through the humiliation of losing to her sister or anyone else. On Oscar night, her agent literally had to drag her out of her house and into the car. She arrived at the ceremony minutes before her category was announced, hair barely fixed, wearing a dress she hadn't properly fitted. When her name was called, she sat frozen until the person next to her pushed her to stand. Walking to the stage, she later said she felt like she was floating, disconnected from reality. At the podium, she gave one of the shortest acceptance speeches in Oscar history, just 32 words, because her mind had gone completely blank. Backstage, reporters asked how she felt. She said she felt nothing, just numbness. It wasn't until hours later, sitting alone in her home with the statue on her table, that the reality hit her. She'd won. Hitchcock had pushed her to the edge of sanity, and she'd come back with an Oscar. The price was her mental health, her family relationships, and a piece of her innocence she'd never recover. Bonus fact: the famous glowing glass of milk became such an iconic image that it spawned an unexpected problem for decades afterward. Film students and directors tried endlessly to recreate the effect, assuming Hitchcock had used some complex lighting technique. Cinematography textbooks speculated about reflectors, special filters, innovative camera angles. Nobody could quite replicate that eerie glow. The truth only emerged when the film's cinematographer, Harry Stradling, finally revealed the secret in an interview shortly before his death. There was a literal light bulb inside the glass. Not a sophisticated movie trick, not cutting-edge technology, just a small bulb submerged in milk with the wire running down through a hollow area in the set. The simplicity embarrassed film scholars who'd written elaborate theories about Hitchcock's genius lighting design. But that was Hitchcock's real genius. He didn't overcomplicate. He found the most direct path to the emotion he wanted audiences to feel: terror from a glowing glass, suspicion from a simple light. and a legacy built on making the ordinary absolutely unforgettable.